Goedenavond of goedemiddag, ik weet niet wanneer je hier naar kijkt, dat mag je lekker zelf bepalen natuurlijk, want het is het digitale stukje, het stukje voorafgaand aan onze laatste bijeenkomst alweer, komende maandagavond. We gaan het hebben dan over de casus die inmiddels op Netschool staat. Die heb je kunnen lezen. Sommigen van jullie, de meeste, hebben daarin ook een rol. Die krijg je iets later toegestuurd. En nogmaals, dit is een heel interessant spel, omdat er zoveel dingen bij elkaar komen. Het spitst zich toe op één concreet, tamelijk dramatisch gebeuren, 's ochtends vroeg met een heftruck. En je zult zien in het gesprek dat er heel veel verschillende dingen en waarden en meningen en mensen en visies door elkaar heen gaan spelen. En dat is nou, om die ingewikkeldheid, als het gaat om verschillende waarden die met elkaar in strijd zijn of die allemaal een plekje moeten krijgen, om die een plek te kunnen geven, om daar wat structuur in aan te kunnen brengen, hebben wij het vak bedrijfsfilosofie bedacht. Bedrijfsfilosofie, het vak is methoden om waarden te mappen en leidende principes in bedrijfsfilosofie te kunnen ontwikkelen, kiezen. Dat is misschien wel het doel van dit vak. Dus het kunnen mappen, het kunnen in kaart brengen van welke waarden er in het spel zijn. En hopelijk ook als leidraad van de organisatie daar een leidende principe, een bedrijfsfilosofie van te kunnen maken. In dit geval nogmaals spitst alles zich toe op die ene gebeurtenis daar in die hangar, waarbij een forkliftchauffeur iets met die forklift doet wat ongelukkig is. Een bekend model dat hiermee te maken heeft is het 7S-model. Dat heeft ook als suggestie dat een bedrijf, dat er altijd verschillende waarden, verschillende belangen en verschillende aspecten spelen. En het idee erachter is dat als een bedrijf gedeelde waarden weet te ontwikkelen, zij samenhang kan creëren tussen die verschillende subdelen en waarden die spelen binnen een organisatie. Nou, laten we beginnen om een film te bekijken, gemaakt door collega Corné Deerne. Misschien heb je me zelfs al een keer gezien, het maakt niet uit. Ik heb hem denk ik wel 5 keer gezien en is hij nog steeds de moeite waard. Mooie film over Philips, onder andere. En ook daar kun je verschillende waarden zien en verschillende keuzes zien die een bedrijf door de jaren heen kan maken. En sommige bedrijven hebben daar een wat duidelijker stempel op gedrukt dan andere bedrijven. En het idee binnen dit vak is dat het goed is om wel daar een duidelijke keuze in te maken. Die in deze film naar voren komen, hebben dat denk ik ook wel gedaan. Je kan je misschien nog herinneren dat we het hadden over die grot van Plato, waarbij het streven was, als je het zou vertalen naar een bedrijfssituatie, dat je iets kan bedenken, een set aan waarden, principes. Principes zijn waarden die je ook als ideaal wil zien. Dat je principes kan ontwikkelen waarbij zo'n bedrijf perfect in vorm zou zijn. Dus daar zou je misschien het plaatje van die McKinsey 7S best een keer op kunnen plakken. Nou, de vraag nu voor jullie is, ga eens naar die film kijken zometeen, die komt meteen hierna. Gaat voornamelijk over Philips, maar ook over een bedrijf dat heet Buurtzorg en dan ook nog over een bedrijf dat heet Semco. En het zijn alle drie bedrijven waar heel veel verschillende waarden doorheen spelen, maar sommige van die waarden zijn echt wel belangrijker en die komen heel sterk naar voren. En daar heeft dat bedrijf ook een duidelijke richtlijn mee. Nou, de vraag eerst is, welke waarden en of principes kun je bij deze bedrijven herkennen? Halverwege de video zul je een stukje zien, onder andere als tip, waarin meneer Anton Philips een toespraak houdt. Maar probeer ook los van dat stukje eens te kijken wat voor waarden spelen er wel niet door die bedrijven heen. Philips, maar ook kijk eens naar Buurtzorg en Semco, kijk eens of je daar bepaalde waarden zou kunnen opschrijven. Waarvan je denkt van, goh, die hebben wel betrekking op dit bedrijf of de manier waarop zij in het leven staan. En de tweede vraag is, waarom zou een heldere bedrijfsfilosofie een bedrijf, bijvoorbeeld dat bedrijf van maandagavond, Vuas Highflyers, waarom zou een heldere filosofie je kunnen helpen bij het nemen van een belangrijke en urgente beslissing, zoals het ook in de casus aan de hand is? Dat is dus je vraag. Denk daar eens over na. Kijk eens naar de fijne video zometeen die hierop volgt. En probeer dan eens deze vragen te beantwoorden. Zoek de waarden die hier in het spel zijn en bedenk hoe je daar als bedrijf bij geholpen zou zijn als je daar een aantal principiële keuzes in zou kunnen maken over welke waarden voor jou als organisatie toch net een stukje belangrijker zijn bijvoorbeeld dan welke andere waarden.
Well, it's great to have the chance to share a few ideas with you today about how do we build organizations that are fit for the future, but also how do we build organizations that are fit for human beings. And I'd like to start by asking you to reflect on a question for a moment. If you had to make a list of the greatest inventions of the last century, the things that have changed our lives that we could hardly imagine living without, what would be the things you'd put on your list? I'm sure you'd have the combustion engine there, semiconductors, all the wonderful pharmaceuticals that we enjoy today, probably the internet, long list of things that have made our lives easier, have made them more fun, and I think, all of those things are important. Having said that, I would argue the single most important invention of the last 100 years was the invention of management. And that sounds maybe a little bit weird. We don't usually think about management as an invention, but if you think about the tools, the methods that we use to bring people together, to mobilize and organize resources for productive ends, that was an invention. And yet I'm going to argue that we're going to have to now reinvent management. The way we lead, we plan, we organize, we hire, we motivate. All of those things we're going to have to reinvent because today organizations are facing a set of challenges that are truly unprecedented. In fact, let me give you just a little bit of history here. Go back with me for a moment to 1890, about 120 years ago. And if you'd been living in America, Germany, Britain, and what we called the developed world at the time, in 1890 you would have found that about 90% of people were still in agriculture. The average manufacturing company would have had less than 4 employees. So it's very fragmented, very small organizations. That was the world circa 1890. And over the next, literally one generation, all of that would change.
Our story begins in 1890 in Eindhoven, a small town in the south of the Netherlands. In the second half of the 19th century, the introduction of electric lighting is making progress. A young man called Gerard Philips seizes the opportunity. In 1891, he establishes a factory for the mass production of incandescent lamps, financed by his father, Frederick. The first years are difficult for Philips. Production improves, but sales remain low. The family wealth is at stake, but the Philips family is eager to win in a business they believe in. At the request of his father and brother, 21-year-old Anton Philips comes to Eindhoven to organize sales. Anton arrives in Eindhoven, takes over the sales effort, and almost immediately generates a turnaround. Starting work early in the morning and not finishing until late at night, he approaches his customers with arguments that are persuasive even today and outpaces the competition. At the end of 1895, these efforts are rewarded with the first small profit showing up on the financial reports. Anton makes a point of truly understanding customers and tries to serve their needs. His biggest success at that time is achieved in Russia. Traveling through Russia in 1898, he books an order of 50,000 lamps for the winter palace of Tsar Nicholas II. Because Gerard does not believe him, Anton sends a telegram with the words 50,000, 50,000, 50,000. This international success nurtures Anton's eagerness to win. Sales and profits of Philips & Co. increase enormously. Anton is rewarded, and on April 1st, 1899, his father makes him co-owner of Philips & Company. In 1911, Anton travels to the United States for the first time and succeeds, with great flair, in buying equipment developed by General Electric for the production of drawn wire. This mission is crucial to Philips' international success, and Anton is reported to have said, "They will know who they're dealing with." The incorporation of N.V. Philips Gloeilampenfabrieken takes place on August 29, 1912. The majority of the shares, and thus control of the company, remains with the Philips family.
By 1915, 25 years later, Ford Motor Company is making more than 500,000 automobiles a year. And in that tiny sliver of time, in one generation, almost all the tools of modern management get invented. Pay for performance, capital budgeting, task design, divisionalization, brand management, all the management tools and methods that you find yet today in organizations around the world, virtually all of those were invented before 1920. And most of them were invented by individuals who were born in the middle of the 19th century. That's what we can call management 1.0. In fact, if you were going to plot the evolution of management over this last 100 years, it would follow kind of a classic technology S-curve, right? A lot of innovation 100 years ago, a lot of new thinking, and then over time, slowly, that pace of evolution slows down. And in our working lifetimes, indeed, if you go back 50, 60 years ago, the way we manage has hardly changed at all. So in many senses, the management principles, the tools, the methods that we find in our organizations, these are legacies, these are hand-me-downs from gurus, from ex-CEOs, from management thinkers who are mostly long dead, long retired, or long in the tooth, and yet it is their view of management that is still driving our organizations. And I think we need to change this. I think it's time to change this, and I'd like to talk a little bit about why. Think about kind of an exponential curve. Imagine just an exponential curve. And think about the things in our world right now that are changing at an exponential pace. Just think about that for a moment. What things are changing at an exponential pace? CO2 emissions, they're going up at an exponential pace. The number of internet connections in the world, on that same curve. The amount of data storage out there, same curve. Number of mobile devices connected to the web, also going up on that kind of a curve. But we face other challenges. The second kind of fundamental new reality for most companies around the world today is hyper-competition. Right? If you go back a few years, there were all kinds of barriers that protected the incumbents from the winds of creative destruction. And those barriers, they used to protect a company's margins. They fattened up, they allowed you to keep your prices high, they fatten the margins. As those barriers come down, every company is in a bare-knuckle fight to defend its margins, defend its position in the marketplace, and the only way of doing that is through innovation.
Aware of the competition and convinced of the need to innovate, Gerard and Anton decide that Philips would benefit from having a research center staffed by people with a background in fundamental science. A physics laboratory is built up from scratch. It is a base for the innovation and excellence and key to the future success of the company. During World War I, the Netherlands become isolated in the midst of the belligerents. Supplies of raw materials and semi-manufactured goods from abroad are cut off. The only way to keep business going is to start its own production of glass and other materials. Instead of weakening the firm's position, the challenges presented by World War I strengthened its independence. New developments made during the war and rapidly adopted by Philips broadened its possibilities.
The winds of creative destruction are forcing companies to be more creative, more inventive. You have to earn your place in the market every single day. Third challenge I think organizations face today, and perhaps maybe the most pressing one. We also live in a world where knowledge itself is becoming a commodity, where it's getting harder and harder for any organization to really differentiate itself, to bring something kind of truly new and unique to the marketplace. Today, knowledge advantages dissipate very, very quickly because your good people go work for your competitor, because you have an army of consultants around the world benchmarking all these companies and transferring knowledge from the fast to the slow and the smart to the not so smart, because all these companies are using the same network of business partners and vendors. That's another conduit for moving all of this knowledge around. So in that world, it's much less about, what kind of knowledge advantage do I have right now than how fast am I creating new knowledge, with the emphasis on the word create. So we've talked about three kind of profound challenges that organizations are facing. How do you build a company that can change as fast as change itself? How do you build a company where innovation is the work of everybody all the time, every day? And how do you create an organization where people are willing to bring you the gifts of their initiative, their creativity, and their passion? I believe the companies that thrive over the next decade and beyond are going to be the companies that make progress on this. The companies that evolve their management models faster than their competitors in ways that make them more adaptable, more innovative, and more engaging places to work. Now the question is, what do you do to accelerate that process? A company that's working really hard to do it, I don't know if they've succeeded yet, but I know they're working really hard. It's an Indian company, an IT services company, one of the fastest growing, most progressive IT services companies in India, tens of thousands of employees. And their whole management model is built on the principle of reverse accountability. Now, a lot of companies talk about, turning the pyramid upside down, that's mostly rhetoric. But these guys are really trying. Let me give you a few things they're doing. This is the company, by the way, where every employee rates their boss and their boss's boss, and all those ratings are published online. When it came to kind of updating, reviewing their strategy, they took all those secret corporate strategies, they distributed them out across the employees. 8,000 people got involved in helping to comment on and build their strategies. That's kind of reverse accountability. Also, they have an interesting little ticketing system in this company. If you're a first-level employee or at any level and you disagree with a decision from your boss, or you think you've been treated unfairly by HR, it's taking too long to process your expense claim, any one of those internal departments that you don't think is serving yourself very well, you can fill out a ticket on them. And so here's my complaint. These tickets, by the way, are visible. They're transparent across the organization. And that ticket can only be closed by the employee. So the manager has to come back to say, what's your concern? Let me understand it, see if I can fix it, or at least tell you why it's this way. And then you can say, okay, I get it. Thanks very much. You close the ticket. Any ticket that doesn't get closed in 24 hours gets escalated to the next level of management. That's reverse accountability, right? People holding their managers accountable. Are you really helping me succeed in my job? And the reason in this company they think it's so important is in that business they will tell you that all of the value is created at the interface between the employee and the customer. Management's job is to encourage the innovation there, but they explicitly say to employees, you are more important than your managers. In fact, the mantra of this company, HCL Technologies, their mantra is employees first, customers second. How often have you heard somebody say that? And in fact, the CEO of Vineet Nair, he stood in front of his customer group, CIOs from big companies around the world, and told them, I'm sorry, for me, you don't come first. Because unless I take care of my employees, they're not going to do the right thing for you.
In 1922, Gerard retires. Anton is now the leader of the company. One of the qualities of Anton Phillips as a manager is that he builds the confidence of young, talented employees. In the 1920s, he appoints deputy directors with clear talents in the commercial, technical, and legal areas. They team up and unite around a common vision of building a great company to supply to, work for, buy from, and invest in. As a leader, Anton is people-focused, responsible, and committed. From its very beginning, the company provides well for its employees. By the 1920s, Philips is acknowledged as one of the 3 leading companies on the world market. With the introduction of radio production at Philips, Anton takes the strategic decision to broaden the base of the company. Radio enriches people's lives. And within 10 years, Philips is a leading company in consumer electronics.
Wir bringen Ihnen heute eine Teilreportage der Reise Henry Fords durch Europa.
Next to lighting and radio, medical equipment becomes a focus of Anton Philips' strategy. In 1927, existing activities in the field of X-ray tubes are boosted significantly through the acquisition of the German X-ray manufacturer CHF Müller. Not only production, but also the application of X-ray is a point of special interest. Anton personally promotes the use of the X-ray in Philips' tests for tuberculosis, with remarkable effect. The Great Depression and the global economic crisis once again pose a great challenge to the company. 1 in 2 employees is laid off, which weighs heavy on Anton as a leader. However, activities at Philips Research remain on the same level as before. This will prove a great asset as soon as business recovers. New and significant innovations find their way to an expanding set of customers to improve the lives of many around the globe. Success calls for celebration. In 1934, Anton Philips' 60th birthday and his 40th Philips Jubilee are celebrated with great enthusiasm. In 1939, Anton retires. Franz Otten, his son-in-law, is his successor. In 1951, at the age of 75, Anton gives his final speech to an audience which includes many young people. He describes what is needed to become successful at a company like Philips.
De arbeider is ons even na aan het hart als het kapitaal. We hopen dat ze ook weer, als ze flink zijn, een betrekking zullen vinden, een baantje zullen vinden in ons bedrijf, dat groot genoeg is om meerdere mensen een eersterangsbaan te bezorgen, als ze er verstand hebben en als ze het karakter daarna hebben. Dat hoeft allemaal niet professeur te zijn. Ik ben ook helemaal geen professor. Dus bij mij allemaal de praktijk, karakter, moed, voortvarendheid en fantasie. Fantasie ook een business.
So whatever difference you want to make, aim high and start working. But don't be content to simply imitate somebody else's best practice, because I just don't think it's good enough anymore. So that's number one. Innovation always starts with that kind of aspiration. It's true when you want to innovate around management, like everything else. Number two, to be a management innovator, like any other sort of innovator, you have to be willing to challenge management dogma, right? You have to challenge the embedded, unexamined, wallpaper beliefs that simply, surround us and limit our degrees of freedom.
Well, I had this unsuccessful career as a rock guitarist, which was wonderful. I mean, it was a wonderful period of my life. And as I started playing with all these people, it became obvious that there was the need for organization and discipline, all of these things that the other organizations had, but it was done because people wanted to. And so I think my big quest from that day to this has always been to identify what it is that transforms people from someone that need to be processed in an organization to people who actually want to. And when they have their own drive and their own decision to do it, how does that change entirely? So what I've done is basically what I do in all is the same thing, which is how do you change or remodel organizations so that they set people free to do whatever they wanted to do.
Welcome to Semco. It mightn't look like it, but this is one of the world's most radical workplaces. And the difference begins at reception. In fact, Semco has 2 receptionists. Nothing unusual about that, except that the company itself doesn't know which one will be there to greet you.
But we are not sure which one will be there in the morning or in the afternoon, because they talk to each other and they set their own schedule.
Almost every one of Semco's 3,000 employees sets their own schedule.
That man is the CEO of this business unit.
It seems the CEO doesn't have an office and is leaving early. He's not the only one.
There's no reason why they shouldn't.
IT worker João Neto gives himself every Monday off. He didn't ask for permission, but he knows it would be very hard for his supervisor to check up on him.
We can do it.
Like these employees, he keeps changing workstations.
The idea is that you shouldn't use the same position. Should not use 2 days in a row.
We don't want to know what time people came, how many hours they worked. We want to negotiate and contract with them for much more important things that have to do with our survival, which is what are they going to do this month? And what do we get from them out of this salary or this value that we're paying? And what do they get out of us in terms of gratification for their life? The rest to us is secondary.
The Semco philosophy is that a lot of what managers do shouldn't be done.
Oh, absolutely. I would say that maybe 30% of people's time is spent trying to understand why people make more than they do, how come people came late, why weren't you at the meeting, can you do this by Wednesday at 6 o'clock, and it's all very silly, and there's an enormous waste, and of course at a certain point in time people just are dumbed down and they say, you know, this is just too much work, what do you want me to do? I'll just do my 9-to-5 thing, I'll learn how to survive in this environment.
That's not what happens here. It seems that knocking off early isn't a problem if the work's been done. Normally this machine shop turns out parts for merchant ships, but the workers here supervise themselves. They'd gone home for the afternoon when we turned up.
Well, they are grown up. They are producing what is required.
So when you open up that door, you don't necessarily know whether the factory is going to be working or not.
Not necessarily.
Then again, some of the workers might be back on Sunday if they need to be. These look like hammocks.
Yes, they are.
They've installed hammocks so they can rest and think in comfort. Do you see people resting in these in the middle of the day?
Nothing wrong.
Nossa, eu não conheço uma expressão para isso.
And here's another radical idea. Each business unit within Semco gets to pick its own furniture. This workplace has deliberately chosen cheap chairs.
Why? Because they want to spend the money in somewhere else.
Semco's workers are frugal when it comes to spending their business unit's money. They each get a share of its profits. And then there's this, a cartoon guide to reading the company's accounts, produced by the union and the company. Staff have access to all the company's financial data, and Semco wants to make sure that its workers understand what they're reading. Ricardo Semler believes that unions still have a role to play in his company, although, as in many places, they're in decline.
Unions have less of a role because we deal more openly with all of these issues anyway. But we ourselves are looking for ways to substitute the decline of unions for internal processes where people elect, every 10 people elect somebody who is a keeper of the cultural values and who has job stability, people who can look at every firing and hiring and be able to take an independent position about it in the name of the employees.
With workers virtually running the business, you could be forgiven for thinking that this cutting-edge capitalism has a distinctly socialist tinge.
If you say, you know, is this Trotskyist or Marxist, is this new socialism, is this European socialism? I don't think so, because the basic issues of the free market are there, which is, tell us how much time you want to work, tell us how much you need to make, tell us what you need in exchange, how you gratify yourself by doing something like this. And this does away with the political ideology issues of what ism does this fall under, because it's just respecting anthropological issues instead of political ideas.
Every 6 months, every Semco worker is invited to select his or her salary. He or she is given information about what workers in similar jobs are getting elsewhere.
Average, the minimum, maximum, the sizes of the companies.
And imagine your boss telling you you should be asking for more.
We have cases where we say, no, think again. We don't think this is fair.
We want to pay you more.
Yeah, we want to pay you more.
But don't ask for too much. You might be fired by your colleagues. The entire unit, not just the bosses, decides who to hire and fire. And with workers sharing profits, no one wants to work with a shirker.
Let us suppose you ask me why you're not working. If you're not doing your job, this is going to affect our profit sharing. So you're taking money out of my pocket if you're not doing what you're supposed to do.
You get the feeling that it's in some ways hard to work at this most successful of Brazilian conglomerates. There's freedom, but with it plenty of pressure to perform.
There is peer pressure for bad behavior. If you're here just to collect things for yourself, to live on some other from other people's efforts, you're not wanted here.
They're under a tremendous amount of responsibility because they're on their own, meaning if the sales don't happen, the business unit ceases to exist. So in this format, they're obliged to actually make things happen, and that responsibility is many times more unforgiving than it sounds.
Because you think about it, I mean, go back to the kind of fundamental question. What problem was management invented to solve? 100 years ago, what problem were those people trying to solve? I can tell you, it wasn't a problem of being adaptable and innovative and an inspiring place to work. The problem they were trying to solve is, how do you turn human beings into semi-programmable robots? How do we take the farm hands and the housemaids and the craftspeople, get them to show up on time, to tend to that machine, to do the same thing over and over again? That's what and by golly, we succeeded. If you want to really see the future of management, you have to look in some really unusual places. And I would tell you one of the best places to look right now is on the web. I mean, kind of management, that's pretty much a feudalistic system. If you think about the web, not so much, right? The web is kind of the global operating system for innovation. So I have a feeling that the kind of values that today characterize the web, we're going to have to bake those into our organizations. The values of openness, meritocracy, flexibility, collaboration, all those deep values, forget the technology, those have to also become the values of our organizations. Why? Because the web already is adaptable, already is innovative, already is amazingly engaging. It has all of the characteristics our organizations lack. So if you want to be a management innovator, the question you want to start asking is, how do you take not just the tools, because sometimes they're kind of superficial, but how do you think about these deep principles on the web, and how do we bake them into our organizations?
As a community nurse, I wanted to start a movement which would make the healthcare and elderly care in Holland better. We have a lot of bureaucracy, and a lot of bureaucracy which is disturbing good solutions. So that's the reason that I called it humanity above bureaucracy. If you look at what Buurtzorg is at the moment, we can say it's a new organizational and a new delivery model. I started in 2007 with 4 nurses, with 3 colleagues, just in one team. trying to go back to the principles of the World Health Organization on community-based integrated care, which I think is a very good model. At the moment, we have 9,000 nurses in 800 independent teams working all over the country. What's very special is that we have only 45 staff people in the head office. And we have 15 coaches, so we don't have management. And we are serving 70,000 patients a year. We have a turnover of 280 million euro per year, and we have just 6 people at the financial administration, and we don't have a CFO. So if you keep things very simple, then you don't need so many people to control all these things. In the 19th in Holland, healthcare, and especially community-based care, was defined as production. And we developed 10 different products, which was called personal care extra, personal care special. And we had nursing care special, nursing care extra, guidance extra. Instead of helping patients, they had to think, what kind of products should I deliver? For a lot of commissioners in Holland, it's the way they buy care. We want to buy so many hours of this and so many hours of that. More and more managers were taking over the profession. So what you saw was that there was more and more management layers in the organizations. A CEO, directors, managers, and they almost forgot that there were also employees. And it's really disturbing the relationship with patients, between patients and nurses. The costs went right up and the quality went down. A lot of nurses quit their jobs because they lost their autonomy and they've lost also their craftsmanship. What I liked a lot about community nursing is that in every situation you can find in some kind of a co-production with the patient what's the best solutions in this situation. When we look at the demographics, and I think it's the same in Great Britain, when we face the coming 20 years, we got a lot of problems with getting enough young people in healthcare. So we should make it more inspirational for young people. Clients, because of these many products, clients were confronted with a lot of different caregivers. So there was one in Amsterdam, and he put all the names on one of the doors in his room. And during 1 year, he got 150 different caregivers and nurses coming at his house. So the idea was independent teams with a maximum of 12 nurses working in a neighborhood for 5,000 to 10,000 inhabitants, and just organize everything themselves. So not thinking about all these different codes and products, but just thinking about what are the best solutions for the patients we are meeting, and doing the assessment themselves, the planning, the scheduling, and so on, and sharing a lot of experience with each other together. The idea of maximum of 12 nurses is that you can coordinate everything together, and you don't need some kind of a leader in a team. They are generalists. They have to be able to take care for all types of patients because they deliver 24 hours a day care. So they organize it, they're available 24 hours a day. We don't have a call center, so they just get all the phone calls themselves and they solve all the things themselves. 50% are bachelor educated nurses. They have their own education budget because they know the best what kind of education they need. The idea is also that informal networks are much stronger than organizational structures. So all these nurses have their networks and have a lot of influence in their environment. This is our vision model. We say we should be part of the community. So every nurse should have her network with volunteers, with the GPs, with the social workers. So informal networks and formal networks, and try to make virtual teams around the patient. We didn't have one management meeting since we started. So a lot of meetings, my former job were only about meetings, from one meeting to another. And I think now we just have time to solve the problems. Then we build an IT system which supports the nurses in a good way. And the next step is also to involve the patients to be active in this platform. What was very nice to experience was that this IT system also worked as some kind of a Facebook. So I write my blog. I don't write policy notes. I don't write strategic notes. But I share my concerns and then in my blog, and then I got a lot of response from the different teams. And when this response is going some direction, then we say, okay, let's make it a new policy. So that's how to develop policy in a modern way, I think. The teams are working very holistic, so they're focusing on the neighborhood. But because of the platform, they feel like one. They feel part of Buurtzorg, but they don't feel Buurtzorg as an organization who gives them trouble, but only as a network who gives them presence. If you look at the cost effectiveness for the organization, the overhead costs are quite low if you look at compared with other organizations. So you can use the money for higher skilled nurses and for innovation and education. We are a non-for-profit organization, we are a foundation, because our values don't fit in a commercial organization. At the moment, the government is taking our way of working as an example. They're now stimulating other organizations, and also other sectors are quite interested in the model. So I also work with policemen and with teachers, because I think it's a general model which can be used in different sectors. I think we have to build organizations on meaningful relationships. So I think that, especially in healthcare, it is about trustful relationships. That is the best, I think, condition for good healthcare. They should think about what their value is for the community. I think we should focus more on happiness and health. I think that when nurses in our organization feel happy, they will stay healthy and they will do good things. And last conclusion is, let's avoid complexity. So we build very complex organizations, and even if we are with 9,000 people, it can be a very simple organization. So try to focus on craftsmanship and on simple organizations, and then the complexity is in the work itself.
Right, we have been told that we really can't change the organizations we work in. That we don't have that chance. You know, that's the head of HR, that's the vice president for planning, or that's the CEO. Nonsense. It's probably not going to happen there. It's going to happen with people like Jeff Sieverts at Best Buy. It's going to happen with folks like Ross Smith in the middle of Microsoft, who've created this wonderful grassroots movement around trust. It's going to happen with a guy like Jordan Cohen at Pfizer, who created a way that ordinary employees can outsource the boring part of their job off their desktop without getting anybody's permission. That's where it's going to happen. Because I think for the first time since the Industrial Revolution, you cannot build a company that's fit for the future without building one that's fit for human beings. And we should be grateful we've been given this chance. Because those management pioneers 100 years ago, they were trying to work against the grain of what it means to be human. We're not. The fact is, human beings, we're amazingly adaptable. There are people sitting here today that have changed careers, that have gone back to school in midlife, maybe that have changed continents, that have had to deal with enormous personal tragedy, challenging circumstances. We are just enormously resilient as human beings. So in many ways, human beings already have the qualities, the essential qualities our organizations lack. Because those organizations have inside them a management model that was built to serve another purpose. It's not one versus the other. We have to do both. But my hope for you is that in some small way, in whatever organization you work, that you become a champion for the future. And that you become a management innovator who's dedicated to creating an organization that will fully utilize and fully honor the gifts of every single person who comes there every day. Thank you so much.